That's a really great question. It's difficult to know what sites to trust even for ourselves sometimes. So you really need to ask yourself a question: what information am I trying to gather, and does this information make sense? Now, as far as appropriateness for children, a lot of times we're concerned about the content that they're viewing and whether or not it's right for them. So if you've got young children, I always suggest using a safe browser. So there's everything from Canine to ones through Covenant Eyes, where you can actually put filters on and you can then filter out certain content, adult content. This stops working usually in about 4th grade, because at some point you are going to start having to come in and bypass all of these parental controls in order for them to be able to get to the sites they need for school. So if you're at a point where they are trying to find information and they can't get to it and you're putting in the parental control password, time to remove the filter, but make sure the device is in a public space. YouTube Kids is great for younger children, but they still shouldn't be on it alone, because you have to remember that any information that's coming through on something like a YouTube platform is user created content. It is not curated by the company, which means anything goes and things can accidentally seep through. So the best approach to know where your kids are going online is to be there with them when they're doing it. The question is, should parents friend their children on social media in order to see what they're doing? And in my opinion, if it's working, great. However, please know that there are lots of ways around for kids to circumvent what their parents see when they don't want their parents to see what they're doing. One thing kids often do on social media is they create what's called a Finsta or a spam account, which means it is a second Instagram account or a second Snapchat account that their parents know nothing about. And so the parents think they're seeing everything when they're not. Kids can also private message through most social media accounts. So once again, parents are not really seeing what's going on. And so the third problem with this is that sometimes parents end up with information about other people's children, and now what do they do with that? So in my house, what I tend to do is parent over shoulder rather than friending them. And that means that when my kids are sitting on the couch and they're scrolling through their social media, I'm looking over their shoulder and I'm asking questions. And it's very transparent. I'm not spying. My kids know that at any point in time, if I feel the need to look at something, I'm going to. And that's really the best way to handle the social media and kind of knowing what's going on. Just being their friend and following them, you're never going to see it all. So parents ask a lot about whether or not it's okay to spy on their children, and they talk a lot about wanting to build trust with their children. And so here's my feeling about that. First of all, as parents, we never trust our children 100%. Even when we tell our kids we trust them 100%, it's everyone else we don't trust. It's not true. I tell my children I trust them 92.6%. And the reason I say that is because when a child feels that their parent trusts them implicitly, they think that if they ever make a mistake, their parents will be so wildly disappointed, they're never going to get over it. And so that forces the child to go underground and to hide it even more. And we don't want that. That's a dangerous situation. So when I tell my kids I trust them 92.6%, that leaves 7.4% for them to royally mess up and know I still love them. As far as spying is concerned, my feeling about that is transparency is always the best first step. Letting your kids know that if they give you a reason to look, you will look, is a perfectly appropriate thing to say. Some kids will do things where they try and clear their history. Well, as a parent, you can always go in, and if you see a large gap in where they've been and that there's nothing there, you've known they cleared their history. And so the question is, why? What is it that's going on? There are certain parental controls that are built into our devices, like our iOS devices, anything Apple, where you can be the parent on the account and the child has a monitored account, and they can't clear their history. They can't access certain things without you knowing about it. And again, I think that's good when your children are a little bit younger, but that transparency is really key. If your child, though, is becoming secretive, if they are withdrawing, if you walk by and they close the laptop shut, you spy. Absolutely, because our job as parents is to keep them safe first, and you let the child know that. So the question that I'm often asked is, how do I talk to my children about pornography without then them wanting to go and search for it, which is usually our big concern, is that if we talk about something, we're going to plant a seed that makes them want to go and investigate further. So there's a couple of things about this. When it is time for you to have a conversation with your child about intimacy and about relationships, that is a time to explain to them, and you're going to see things online and in movies that do not represent the values of our family and what we want for a relationship. I think it's important when we talk about pornography that we make sure that children understand that what they see sometimes is not real. That these are actors who have chosen to participate in something, who have signed something that said that they're willing to do this, and these are adults that are involved in that. But it's not representative of what a real relationship looks like. My biggest concern with pornography is that it is normalizing certain acts that are not necessarily normal in all relationships. And if a child, a young child especially, has been exposed to something like this and they don't have somebody to talk to about what a relationship really should look like, they start to think that they should mimic what they see in this content, and that's what we really want to avoid. So my feeling is that if you're going to have a conversation with your child about what it means to be intimate with another person, that's when that pornography conversation comes into play. And it doesn't have to just be about porn. It can be about what they see in movies as well. That's not necessarily pornographic, but having a conversation about our values matters most. When I'm going down Ventura Boulevard and I've got my kids in my car with me, if there's a billboard I see that does not represent my values, I'm going to be the first person to say something about it to my children. To my 8-year-old child, I will say, the woman that's up there on that billboard in that skimpy little outfit eating a hamburger, her being in that skimpy little outfit has nothing to do with eating a hamburger, and it bothers me that somebody else has made that association. When I point those things out, I let my children know what my values are.
Excellent.
So when should a parent give a child a device or an account? For me, it's when a life event requires that they need it. So I know some kindergartners who have access to iPads because maybe they're in 2 different homes and a parent wants to be able to FaceTime with the child without having to go through the other parent. That happens. To me, that's a life event. Does that child need to carry a $600 iPhone around with them at all times? Probably not, but having access to a device in the location where they are, that makes sense to me. I believe that a child needs an account when a life event requires the account. And sometimes it's because they want to be able to communicate with grandma across the country. And sometimes it's because all of their friends are communicating through Snapchat or Instagram and they now feel left out. And that's a really tough thing for them socially. I don't buy into just because everybody else has it, my child should have it too. That's just not a philosophy that I subscribe to. I feel very comfortable saying to my child, you do not need this right now. And so for that reason, you're not going to get it. But I also know that it does happen. And so we've got to be sensitive to that. My recommendation in those situations is that if everybody else is communicating through a certain platform and your child is not, maybe you can find a way for them on a shared device to be able to participate in that platform when you're nearby, when you are with them, and you can show them why the way they say things matters. When kids first start texting, I think that a parent should be with them at every moment that they are texting, because when they are 10 years old, they don't know that it's not okay to say over text, oh, I'm going to kill that person when I see them tomorrow. They see this as just a turn of phrase. They don't think of it as a possible threat. And so it requires us as parents to be present when they first start learning how to use these things to say, nope, you can't send that text message. It also is a really good way, if parents are nearby when these things are happening, that the child says, hey, what do you think about this? If a child receives a message that is threatening or hurtful or unkind or just untrue, and there is a lot of drama that comes along with having social media and group texting. It just does. If there's drama in the real world, the social media and the group texting is only going to heighten that drama. And so for some kids, it means, you know what? this is time for you to get off of these platforms and not participate, because if you don't want to be a part of the drama, you have to take control and choose not to be a part of it. So there's really a lot of kind of parenting that comes into play here, and that's a lot of extra work for us as parents too. We don't always want to do it. My last piece about this, though, is for parents. I don't want them to feel that it has to be on their child's timeline. I want it to be on the parent's timeline. It's okay for a parent to say, no, you can't use that device right now because I can't be there with you to use it. So you need to give me 20 minutes, let me finish what I'm doing, and then I can sit down next to you and we can go ahead and do this. So we have a charging station in our house, which allows me to give my kids technology rather than take it away. And so they'll come to me and they'll ask first, and they'll say, hey mom, can I text my friends? Or can I look at this social media account, depending on the age. I don't allow my children to have social media until 13 because that's what the law says, and so I tend to follow that. But I want it to be where I'm able to say, you know what, we're gonna have dinner in 20 minutes. Now is probably not the best time for us to sit down and start something like that. It also gives me a window into their lives too, and I show interest, and that makes them feel good that I actually care about what's going on in their world. So the rules and guidelines for me start with the ABCs, which is ask, bring, check before change. So if all the devices live on a charging station and they are always there when they are not in use, and by the way, I put my device on that charging station too. My husband puts his device on that charging station too. We all follow the same rules in the house because it reminds us that there's a time and a place for everything. And when I'm in a face-to-face conversation, is not the appropriate time for me to also be texting somebody else. But the ABCs are really simple. Ask first. Before you pick up any device, just ask. Can I do this right now? Do I have time to be doing this? It gives everybody a moment to kind of take a look, see what's going on around them, make sure everybody has gotten plenty of exercise that day before they start binge watching something on Netflix, that there aren't chores that still need to be done, that homework doesn't still need to be done, that sleep doesn't need to occur very quickly. And so if we ask first, that solves a lot of problems. B is bring me along. I want to see what it is you're doing. If you're going to start a new game, if you want to play League of Legends, guess what? You're going to have to teach me how to play before I feel very comfortable with it. I want to know if it's appropriate for my child, and the only way to do that is to actually engage in it first with them. C is check before change. And this is my favorite because this was something that happened with my kids where they would say to me, oh mom, I've got to do homework, so I need my laptop for homework. And they would sit down at the kitchen table and they would start doing their homework, and then I would walk away for 2 seconds and come back and they're on a YouTube video, which has nothing to do with their homework. Okay, you asked to do your homework. You did not ask to watch a YouTube video. You need to check before you change. And if you follow those kind of 3 simple starting rules, it makes it much easier to manage all the devices. The next part of that then is always, and I'm sure this is on your list, is how much screen time is appropriate for my kids. So I want to roll all this into one. And when we're talking about how much screen time, there's no magic number. There just isn't. And when the American Academy of Pediatrics said 2 hours a day was a good amount of screen time, that was an obesity study and not a technology study. So that doesn't work for me, because if 2 hours a day, what they're saying is the more kids sit, the bigger they get. So what do I do about my readers that want to sit and read for 3 hours at a time? Believe it or not, it's not healthy for their bodies to sit for 3 hours in the same position, staring at the book this close to their face. Everyone needs to take breaks. Everybody does. Reading is great for your mind. It expands your vocabulary, your imagination. These are all super important things. But if we're talking about physical health, everybody needs to take breaks and get up and move, no matter what it is that you're doing. And so instead of us finding this magic number, what I look at is 4 things. 1, do you have time to be doing this right now, or should you be doing something else? 2, how's your physical health? Did you move more than you sat today? 3, how's your ergonomic health? If you have been in this position, you're putting so much pressure on your spine that you're causing a curve in your spine. So hold the device up, or if you're going to be typing for a long period of time, make sure you're sitting in an ergonomically correct desk. If you're gaming, make sure you take breaks every 30 minutes. And then finally, does my behavior work for my family? If you have a child who is obsessed with a certain game, but when they're done playing it, they act like a monster, they probably shouldn't be playing that game for right now. If they watch a certain TV show and they can't stop watching the show, they probably shouldn't be watching the show for right now. It's not a forever situation. But when we look at the whole picture rather than at specific screen time, now we're talking about health and wellness, which really changes it. We need to get the devices out of the bedrooms. I mean, that's just science. I mean, we absolutely need to get the devices out of the bedroom. We now know for a fact that having cell phones, laptops, tablets, gaming consoles, desktops, all of it is causing severe sleep disruption, not just for kids, but for adults too. 3 things happen, and I'm gonna grab my phone for a moment so I can show you. So 3 things happen when you have a device in the bedroom. Am I still on the camera there?
Yeah, you're good.
The first thing that happens is the blue light that comes from the device causes your circadian rhythm to think it's daytime instead of nighttime. So it makes it really difficult to fall asleep, which is why all the pediatricians said don't let children look at a device an hour before they go to bed. But kids are smart and savvy, and so they just dim the light. They put night shift or flux on, or I see kids that wear special glasses that block out the blue light. And that actually all does work. But it doesn't solve the whole problem here, because the second issue that comes when you take this device into bedroom at night is you don't get off the device. And we see this with adults too. It's always one more text, one more email, one more comment, one more post, one more video, one more game, whatever it is. And now we're not going to bed when we meant to go to bed. And believe it or not, sleep is one of the best things you can do for your overall health. Adults need 6 to 8 hours. Older teenagers need at least 8 to 10 hours. They say middle schoolers need 9.25 hours. I don't know why it's so specific, but that's what it is. And elementary age students need 10 to 12 hours of sleep every night. So if you are using this device up until the time you go to bed, you're going to go to bed later, and you are not going to get the quality of sleep you need. The third issue has to do with EMFs, electromagnetic force, which is a non-ionized radiation. So I don't want this to be thought of as X-rays or microwaves. It's not. It's radio frequency. And we've got these all around us. But we know that when we have high concentrated doses, it penetrates a part of the brain called the pituitary gland, which is where melatonin is produced and secreted, and it stops the production of melatonin. So right now, with the lights and everything on here, so I've got about 45 units of this. Do you happen to have a device on you, or you don't? Do you have a device on you? Do you mind if I show it? Camera? So when we look at a device here, it's at about 2,300. Okay, so that's what's coming out of the cell phone. Now the cell phone's on, but believe it or not, you can try this at home, and even if your cell phone is off, it will still give off the same amount of energy, because the way the phones work is they're constantly searching for a signal. Airplane mode does not help.
No kidding.
Not with that. It helps with certain dings and pings and notifications coming in, and that's terrific because that won't wake you up. But the bubble of energy is actually still present because they are always looking for a connection, even when they're completely turned off. So I know a lot of people are using their cell phones as their alarm clocks, but what they don't realize is they're causing massive sleep disruption for themselves. People are starting to feel something called phantom vibration syndrome, where they think their phones are vibrating even when they're not. I've got people behind the camera shaking their heads. Yes, yeah, it's a real thing. And it's because our brain starts to stim looking for that ding ping vibration. And so we're causing all sorts of issues for ourselves that we really don't need to be. Go to Target, buy a $10 clock that beeps or plays music. They work just fine. I do get kids that talk about wanting to listen to music before bed or meditation. So the Amazon Echo Dots, I think, are a good kind of solution. I think they're a good compromise because you can put them all the way across the room. They give off far fewer EMFs than a cell phone does something with a screen. Those waves disappear in the air and they won't affect you where you're sleeping with the distance. And then it's all voice activated and there's no screen to distract them from doing all the things they want to do before bed. So the question is, what about Wi-Fi, and is Wi-Fi, a lot of people are worried, is Wi-Fi safe and things like this. So most Wi-Fi, especially in schools, our access points, they're up in the ceilings, and so they're far enough away that they are not causing, and plus the kids aren't sleeping while they're at school. They shouldn't be sleeping while they're at school. So I'm not too concerned about that. But yes, there have been studies that show that plants that are near Wi-Fi routers don't thrive as well as plants that are away from them. This all has to do with kind of these energy levels that we're talking about. I'm very cautious to say that EMFs are causing any sort of issues with cell structure in our bodies because we honestly don't know. There are studies that say that yes, cell phones are causing damage to cell structure, and then there are other studies that say absolutely they're not. We've got some schools in other countries, like in France, that have removed all Wi-Fi from their elementary schools out of an abundance of caution, but not necessarily because we have conclusive evidence. And so my feeling is, let's mitigate our risks. These tools are way too important for us to just say, never mind, we're not using them anymore. But I can keep my cell phone in the kitchen when I'm sleeping. I don't need to have it in my bedroom with me at night. I don't keep my cell phone on my person if I'm not using it. If I need to have it in my hand because I'm using it, fine. But I don't know if you noticed, but as we were talking, I just tucked it under my chair because I don't need to have it in my hand. We've got ergonomic issues with constantly holding these things. I mean, we cause tendinitis in our hands. We cause neck strain issues. So it's kind of a myriad of issues that can be resolved just by putting it down when we don't need it. So Bluetooth and the earbuds and the Apple Watches and all this wearable technology. So if you read your Apple manual, it tells you not to put your phone 6 inches to your head. And that's because of these EMFs. And again, it's out of an abundance of caution. So I called Apple and I said, well, what about your AirPods? Because you put those directly in your ears to your brain. And they didn't know the answer to that. I still have yet to get, I have emailed, I have called, I'm really trying to get an answer as to why it's okay. The best answer I've gotten is the AirPods have far fewer EMFs than the phones do, but they still have really high levels. You can test it yourself. I see AirPods are like at 1600 based on my counter, and my counter is not necessarily the standard for EMF measurement. It's to demonstrate. It should not be looked at as conclusive science, please. But in saying that, I don't wear AirPods. I choose not to. But I've got my husband where he does wear wearable technology, he wears an Apple Watch. Why? Because he has a heart issue. And that heart issue is actually, we know if he's having a problem, if his Apple Watch tells him that he's having a problem. That to me is a life-saving device and he's absolutely going to wear it. I don't wear one because I don't need one. And so I choose not to. Again, it's always that until we have conclusive evidence, which we're not going to have for another 20 years, we mitigate our risks. I had a parent recently talk to me about a diabetic child. Yes, I want that child to wear that Bluetooth device because that is a life-saving piece of technology. But do the rest of us need to wear it? Not necessarily. So we've got to weigh the cost benefit. So a lot of times people ask, because I talk about putting Echo Dots in the bedroom rather than having cell phones and laptops, and so people are concerned that Amazon is listening to them at all times. But Amazon has been really transparent about what information they gather and what they don't, and so for right now I feel pretty comfortable with it. So the Echo Dot, the way that it works, and I know people are like, well, it's listening all the time because it wakes up when it says Alexa. Here's how that works. Alexa is on a frequency. Think about, have you ever been in a crowded restaurant and you didn't hear the conversation across the table, but as soon as someone said your name, you clued in. And you're like, oh, wait, what? It's because our brains are trained to find that specific frequency, and it alerts us when that frequency has been basically put out, and then we cue into it, we clue into it. It's the same thing with the Echo Dot. It's the word Alexa is on a specific frequency, and so the minute the device hears it, it wakes up. You can mute the Echo Dot. So there's a button on it that will not allow any voice transmission to go through. But the only thing that Amazon is really collecting is once you say Alexa, it wants to know what questions you're asking, because then it can personalize your experience and they can get smarter about what your needs are and what your wants are, and they can provide you with those things. You're going to start to see, if you ask a lot about the weather, you're going to start to see advertisements about different weather apps that you might want to use, or a thermometer that you can put in your backyard and you can buy it on Amazon. It's those kinds of things that they're looking for. And it's not a person that's sitting there listening and reading everything. It is giant supercomputers, it's servers that are using AI to find keywords, and they pull out those keywords and match you with advertisers. So that's the real story here. Do we give up some privacy? Absolutely. Even more than some. We give up a lot of privacy. So my feeling is that a couple of things. One is that go into it knowing what you're giving up, and then base all your decisions about what you're willing to do based on knowing that you're giving up that amount of privacy. I won't buy any of my prescriptions online through a third-party pharmacy. I won't do it because I don't know what a third-party pharmacy in another country is doing with my medical information. But I have no problem asking Alexa to send my groceries to me. So again, it's what I need versus what I'm willing to give up for it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So personal safety is something that I really think we should be discussing with our children. We've got to move away from stranger danger. I honestly, parents, I'm gonna look right at the camera and I'm going to beg you to stop talking about stranger danger and do this differently, because not all strangers are dangerous, and not all people who are dangerous to our children are strangers. 96% of children who are sexually abused are abused by someone they know, not someone they don't know. And so then we give them mixed messages about stranger danger because we say don't talk to strangers, but then we take them to the grocery store and some nice lady behind you is like, oh, your child is adorable, and we elbow our kids and say thank you, don't be rude to that person, and we force them to talk to a stranger. Or we take them to a restaurant and we want them to order for themselves and we're forcing them to talk to strangers. So this mixed message is really, really problematic. The rule about strangers is that you don't talk to them unless a trusted adult tells you it's okay. Right? That's the whole thing about strangers, especially for our children at this age. Elementary and middle school kids, very rarely are they without adult supervision. Probably by 8th grade, or 7th grade even, maybe you're letting them go to the mall on their own, but you're allowing them now to interact with strangers because they have the cognitive wherewithal to know how to interact with those strangers. So this is where personal safety comes in, and this is really what we need to be talking about. We need to teach our kids how to be safe with strangers, acquaintances, friends, and family members, with all types of people. And it comes down to two simple things. 1, don't give people information they don't need to have. And 2, don't cultivate relationships with people and hide it from your parents. That's it. Those are the 2 big rules about personal safety. Not giving people information they don't need to have. Kids tell me all the time when they're online, they would never tell anyone their name, address, and phone number. And that to me is kind of it doesn't work. Let's just say it like that. It doesn't matter. Your kids' names, addresses, and phone numbers are already out there for anyone to find. You can go look at whitepages.com, Spokio.com, a website called pleaserobme.com. You'll find all kinds of information about your family's name, address, and phone number. These are public records. My bigger issue is, where are they putting their name, address, and phone number? They don't need to be putting that on a YouTube channel because that is not information that audience needs to know. But if they're going to order a Domino's pizza online, they are going to tell a total stranger online their name, address, and phone number to get that pizza there. Then the kids will say, well, don't give anyone your credit card number. Okay, you're right. On Instagram, nobody needs to know your credit card number, even if you have a credit card number, or your parents' credit card numbers. But if you want to order something on Amazon, that's a situation-specific event where that information is necessary in that moment. So one of the analogies I use is, let's pretend you take your children to Starbucks and the person behind the counter says, hi, welcome to Starbucks. What would you like to drink? Is your child allowed to answer that question? And the answer is yes, situation specific, that makes sense. Then the person behind the counter says, what's your name so I can put it on your cup? Can the child give their real first name? Yes, they can. If they want to make one up, that's fine, but their real first name in that situation makes sense. But then what if the person behind the counter says, so what's your favorite sport? What pets do you have at home? What are their names? What's your favorite color? What are the names of your siblings? Would your children know that that's weird? Because it is. In that situation, there is no reason somebody should be asking those questions. And in a gaming environment or on social media or YouTube, no one should be asking those questions. Personal safety dictates you only give people information they need to have. Okay? The second part of personal safety is this cultivation of relationships. Children automatically assume that if it's another child that they are talking to online, that is a safe person. And that is also not true, because other children can be detrimental to your child. There are frenemies, there are identity thieves, and there are predators. that want to make connections with your child. The only way to combat that is not to say, don't talk to anybody online, because at some point your child is going to need to do that, but rather, if you are talking to somebody online, tell me about it. I want to know who your friends are at school, on the baseball field, at church, and in World of Warcraft. Because if someone is important to my child, they're important to me too, and I don't care where my child meets them. And that's what's going to keep our kids safe. So addiction is, let me put it out there like this. First of all, less than 6% of teens are actually addicted to technology. It's a small population that are truly addicted. How do you know if a child is addicted to something? Well, their behavior changes dramatically. They are no longer sleeping. They're withdrawn. They're lying. They are doing things that are very, very out of characteristic for them in order to be able to satisfy their addiction. So if you have said to the child, okay, you can't take the phone into bed with you at night, and let's say you as the parent, now they're sneaking it, you take it into your room. If that child sneaks into your room to take that device and then stays up all night with it, there's probably an issue here. But the issue is most likely not the device itself. It's what the device connects them to that is the bigger issue. And so that's what we need to get to the crux of. We need to find out, why is this child carrying this device with them at all times? Sometimes it's because there's things that are going on in their real world, either with their parents or their friends, and they just feel like they need to connect with somebody else, and they can get to that person through that device. Sometimes it has to do with them feeling left out or neglected, and so they're looking for those connections. With gaming, though, there is true addiction that comes with gaming, and believe it or not, video games are meant to addict people. They are done on purpose to keep you there as long as possible. And when you have a brain that does not have a fully functioning frontal lobe, which is responsible for reason, logic, and impulse control, it's very easy for kids to fall down this rabbit hole and have a very difficult time getting out of it. Again, you're going to see physical signs if the child is addicted to something like video games, or even addicted to something like pornography, where they want to do nothing but that. If they no longer want to do things that they've always gotten joy from before, you may have an issue here. And there are addiction specialists that you can reach out to. And if you feel like your child is in that place, reach out to me. You can go to lorigetz.com. You can find my phone number and my email there, and I can connect you with the right person if that is something you're really, really feeling is a problem. Most kids have just developed bad habits, and they're not addicted, but they're so afraid they're going to miss something that they take their cell phone with them while they're doing their homework, because they just want to look over for a second and don't realize that that's interrupting their learning. When they don't care as much about their learning as they do about their peers, it's a struggle, and parents need to intervene at that point and say, I'm going to help you. Hand me that device so that I can take it out of the room for the next 45 minutes so that you can really engage in what you want to do.